Let's talk a little bit about deliverable 4 first. Hopefully you have spent the last few weeks trying out various aspects of expanding fitness function, evolutionary algorithm, neural architecture, the morphology of your robot, the complexity of its environment, new sensor types. In deliverable 4, next week you're going to be submitting, as always, images and videos, proving to us that you've started to create 2 different variations of your code base, A and B. And you're going to be submitting visualizations from 1 run of A and 1 run of B. So you are not proving to us next week that B is better than A or A is better than B, or you can't detect any discernible difference between A and B. You're just showing us what the difference is between A and B. Yeah? We've seen lots of different visualizations in this course, different ways of visualizing the behavior of your robots, how the behaviors of your robots change over evolutionary time. We've seen visualizations of neural architecture, seen all evolutionary dynamics, so how the population is evolving. Throughout the assignments themselves, you've been printing a lot of stuff to the terminal, showing internal updates of neurons and synaptic weights and so on. So what we want to see when you submit deliverable 4 is, here's a 30-second video of variant A running. Here's a visualization of what resulted from 1 run of A. Here's another 30-second clip of B running, where, as you can see, everything looks exactly the same except this piece. This is the piece that's different. Yeah? Okay. Hopefully you have some time this week also to think about exactly what your A and B test is going to be. We talked about this a little bit last time. You can obviously make an A-B test where it's obvious that B is going to make it easier for evolution to evolve better behavior with the same number of trials. If you're evolving jumping and in B you make the motors 100 times stronger than they are in A, we're not going to be surprised that B manages to evolve better jumpers than A. Right? Changing the neural architecture for a jumping robot, it's not immediately obvious that hidden neurons or recurrent connections or self-connections might facilitate the evolution of jumping. That would be a much better A-B test. Yeah? Okay. Hopefully some of you kind of already have an idea about what your A and B test is going to be. If you still haven't converged on an idea, contact me or Krishna, and we can give you some guidance on what makes for a good A and B test. Any questions about that? Okay. Next week, after you've submitted deliverable 4, you've got a little bit of breathing room. I know this is the busy time of year, but you've got a couple weeks between the submission of deliverable 4 and presenting your final project, where you're going to be performing multiple runs of A, multiple runs of B, and then hopefully showing us during the exam period that A is better than B, or A is better than B is better than A is better than B, or there's no discernible difference between them. We are not looking for you to prove to us that B is better than A. What we're looking for is a good A-B test, which is collecting enough data from A and collecting enough data from B to come to a conclusion one way or the other. If you collect sufficient data from A and B and prove that there is no discernible difference, that expansions to the neural architecture did not facilitate or hinder the evolution of jumping, that's a perfectly fine result, as long as you have enough data to convince us that it didn't help and it didn't hurt. Make sense? Yep.
So you say we don't need to prove it, but we're trying to convince you. Like,
yep.
Should we be using like statistical tests on our data?
So yeah, this is not a statistics course. So for those of you that are comfortable with statistical testing, p-values, that's fine, you can use them. You don't need to use them. If you have enough runs, you should be able to come to a conclusion one way or the other. That's fine. Yeah. What does not make for a good A-B test at the end is to say, here's a couple of videos of robots from A, here's a couple of robots from, here's a couple of videos of robots from B. You can see some robots in A are good, some robots in B are good. I don't really know whether it helped or hurt. Yeah, that's not what we're looking for. Make sense? Okay. All right. So we are working our way through our penultimate theme here in the course on collective robotics, looking at ways in which machines could, and animals already have, evolved the ability to work together. There are obvious advantages in working together, assuming you can pull it off, but it's tricky to get it to happen. It's tricky to evolve teamwork and coordination. What are some of the stumbling blocks we looked at last time?
The helpfulness of like identity or like reference or self-reference.
Absolutely. So identity and references. Who's in my group? Who's doing what? Do they know they're supposed to be doing what? Do they know that I know they're supposed to be doing what? Do I know that they know that I know that they're supposed to be doing that? Again, teamwork, working together physically, provides a foundation for building increasingly abstract forms of cognition. Like one thing we haven't talked about too much in this course yet is social intelligence. I know that she knows that he did that, and they know that I know, therefore I should do A, and we'll all get along just fine, right? Very tricky. What are some other challenges or stumbling blocks we saw along the way to the evolution of cooperation and teamwork? So evolving identity or specialization helps. What else?
The kind of breeding you do.
The kind of breeding, exactly. So how do genes do not confer selective advantages on groups, only individuals. There is no such thing as selection pressure for groups or group selection. It's a very long and controversial debate in theoretical evolutionary biology about whether evolution acts on groups directly. The consensus seems to be no, right? So it depends on how genes are passed from one generation to another, whether that mechanism can support teamwork and coordination. What are some other stumbling blocks we saw?
So like if you give the same, like even if you have name-based like references and you give the whole population the same direction, and like they might like converge at one point, or like not do what you want it to do.
Absolutely, right? They might, holding specialization is very difficult in a group, right? They may all end up trying to do the same thing. They may not be clear on who's supposed to be doing what, right? One way to clear away all the confusion is to just say it, right? I'm going to go for the gazelle. I don't know what the rest of you are doing, but figure it out, right? The evolution of signaling. Once signaling starts to evolve in a population, it can support communication and ultimately language. But there are, again, roadblocks to the evolution of signaling. What are they? It's very tricky to evolve signaling and communication within a group. Why? It obviously has happened. It's happened in our species, it's happened in other species, but it's difficult. Why?
Like at the same time, you have someone that evolves a signal and someone that can receive the signal and like do something with it.
Absolutely. So in signaling, you need the sender and the receiver to be coordinated, right? The sender needs to send out a consistent signal under the same conditions, and you need a receiver to be able to receive and do the right thing consistently under those signals. And that's where we left off last time in lecture 22 with the evolution of communication. We were looking at this initially kind of strange setup where we have male and female agents. They have different sensor motor capabilities. So just as a reminder here, the females stay where they are. They are sessile. They are deaf. They do not hear any signals, but they can signal themselves. Males are on the move. They're blind. They cannot see other males or females. They cannot signal themselves, but they can hear. They can hear signals. Now, what they do when they hear a particular signal, and what signal a particular female emits under what conditions, that's up to the evolutionary process in this experiment. Yeah? Okay. We ended last time by just starting to look at a couple of snapshots from this evolutionary process. This paper was, again, pre-physics engine, so we're basically just looking at a grid world And we're looking at the statistics of what the 800 males are doing in response to what the 800 females are doing. So at the beginning, all of the 800 females and all of the 800 males, they all have random neural controllers. So they're signaling at random. The males are moving at random. Among the 800 females, they emit 1 of 8 of these songs. So the output layer for the female network has 3 output neurons in them. So the females are fixed so that they can only sing 1 of 8 songs. And anytime a female sings a particular song, we can observe any males in her signaling radius and see what those males do. And not surprisingly, at the beginning here, when the males are moving randomly, there's 4 different things that the males can do. A quarter of the time, they do 1 of these 4 actions, right? It's kind of a sanity check. This is what you would expect. If you're a male in this very, very early world here, where signaling hasn't really evolved yet, the females are just signaling at random, what's the worst thing a male can do in this situation? Let's start with that. Stand still, right? So after 5,000 time steps in this simulation, we now have this distribution of behaviors across the 800 males. Most of the time they're moving forward. A minority of the time, every once in a while, they will stay where they are and turn 90 degrees to the right or 90 degrees to the left, and no males are standing still anymore. So evolution is starting to occur in this population of 1,600 agents already. Remember that this is a very different evolutionary algorithm from all the rest that we've seen before. There are no generations. We're not deleting the poor ones and making randomly modified copies of the survivors. Although it's a very simple simulation, it's much more biologically realistic from an evolutionary point of view from anything we've seen before. A male that moves into a cell occupied by a female. The female produces a randomly modified copy of herself, the female child, and the male produces a randomly modified copy of himself, the male child. So we've got 1 sister and 1 brother. They go out into the world and they're placed at random positions, random occupied cells, and they overwrite. This new female overwrites an old female, and the new male overwrites an old male. Yes, so the new male is played. We are searching over all of the cells occupied by males, and that male replaces another male. Last time I mentioned this is known as a steady state evolutionary algorithm. Steady state, meaning the number of males and females always stays steady. There's always 800 males, always 800 females. Yeah? Just trying to keep things simple here and focus on what they're interested in, which is the evolution of signaling or communication. There's nothing in here that explicitly rewards. There's no fitness function that rewards females that signal appropriately, or a fitness function that rewards males for doing the right thing, right? There is no fitness function here. However, we're already starting to see, at least among the males, evolution of behavior that you would expect. Okay, what's next? We now have males that are moving forward most of the time. You'll notice if you march down the second column here, no matter what song the female sings, doesn't really matter. The males are not really responding to different songs. They're just more or less always moving forward. If we keep going, 7,500 time steps into the simulation, there's an obvious joke here about human males not looking at their GPS and being assured they know what they're doing, not listening to anyone and just heading for the target, right? Okay, so there is no evolution of communication here. We have males that whatever their direction of travel is, they just keep moving in that direction. Why did these males evolve from these male ancestors? Why did they even stop turning left and right? These males produced more offspring than these males. That's why they evolved.
Because like by random chance, right? Like if and it's the setup is one of the things, right? Where if a male walked off the top, it would just come back up the bottom, right?
Yes, that's right.
Playing that way. So like by probability, like random chance, like these ones probably just wound up in one of the ranges.
They wound up not just in one of the female ranges, but they ended up entering a cell occupied by the female, right? The females are signaling, but you can tell from this distribution the males are not listening. Even if the females are consistently emitting a signal or a song under appropriate conditions, males aren't listening. Yeah? As you mentioned, just as a reminder, we've got this grid world, but it's a donut, it's a toroid, right? So a male that moves in a particular direction will keep moving in that direction forever. They wrap around again, but they never come up against the edge of the world. There is no edge to this world. Why did turning left and turning right die out? Why do males no longer turn left or turn right?
Because if there's a box, like the grid occupied by the female, and you go straight and you go through it, going straight again will guarantee that you pass through that square again.
True, yeah, so the females aren't moving, so even if you get close to a female, you enter into the signaling territory, you wrap around, you're going to enter that territory again, but you're still not going to end up co-occupying the same cell as her because you're on a straight line, right?
Like if you just keep going straight, you're going to see more spaces than if you just turned around.
Think about it. If you're a male and you're sitting in a cell and there's no female in that cell, and you burn or you waste one time step turning left, it's guaranteed that there's going to be no female in that same cell again the next time step, right? So from the male's point of view, it's a waste of time, right? You're guaranteed not to locate a female at the next time step if you turn left and you stay in that box, right? Turning left, yeah, sorry if that wasn't clear. Remember the males here, the male controllers down here have 4 output neurons. The 4 output neurons, they do not apply an activation function. They're not scaling the values. So whichever of these 4 values is largest, that's the action that male performs. A male is only allowed to perform 1 of these 4 actions at each time step. So the males better choose wisely. If you keep moving straight, you at least have a non-zero probability of entering a cell occupied by a female. So not bad, right? Not bad, assuming that there is no language in this world. Can the males do better than this? Imagine the females have not evolved any signaling yet. Imagine that the females are singing at random. Is there anything better than this that the males can do? This is it, right? There is no other way. The males are blind. They cannot see females. They can hear songs, but if those songs have no information in them, there's nothing in that, there's no information that the males can rely on, you might as well ignore the song and keep going.
Are we assuming the males are aware of the fact that there's like a radius they can hear around the female?
Yep, even if there's a radius that they hear, right? So you're a male and you're outside any female radius, so you hear nothing. What the male receives, oh, there's a typo here. This should be 0, 0, 0. So if you're outside any female signaling radius, what you hear, what arrives at the input layer of a male controller is 0, 0, 0. You can assume for the moment that 0, 0, 0 is silence. The male is moving along, moving along, moving along, and suddenly the male hears something else. The input layer receives 0, 1, 0. Unbeknownst to the male, he has entered the signaling territory of a female and suddenly hears something else. What should the male do in that situation?
Not perform an action that makes it not hear anything.
Not perform an action that makes it not hear anything. Okay.
Stay in the radius. I don't know if there's...
You could stay, right? The male could stay and turn left or turn right.
Like if you had a memory, you could be aware if you heard a sound like the last time step, and then if you move somewhere and you don't hear it anymore.
Yep.
You can just, even though the females can't stop singing, you can might be better to assume that you moved out of the radius and move back to where you
Okay, it's possible that the males could evolve the ability to turn around and re-enter the territory.
Is what they hear, if they're like in the range of a female, is like the volume consistent in the range all throughout?
Good question. Yes, the volume is consistent. So the females have 3 output neurons. Imagine we have one female that is singing this actual song here, 1, 0, 1. That's what she's singing. The male enters that territory. At that time step, the male will hear, or we will copy into the male controller's input layer 1, 0, 1. It's a good question. There's no volume. So there's no information here about whether the male is closer to the female or further away. Just knows that it's heard a song. Yeah? A male might start to evolve the ability to turn right and somehow stay in that territory, but a male descendant of that male who hears the same song somewhere else, turning right consistently is not necessarily the best thing to do. There isn't enough signal yet for the males to know what to do when they hear a song. Yeah? So this is the best thing that males can do under these conditions. Yeah? Okay. However, if we keep, in this case, the simulation kept running, and 15,000 time steps later, so another 7,500 time steps later, this is what the males are now doing. What's happening?
Two of the songs are getting associated with specific movements.
Absolutely. So two of the 8 possible songs have started to acquire meaning, at least meaning for the males. The males have evolved to turn when they're on the same row and column as females. Females have evolved to signal this information. So the 6th and 7th song here, there are some females among the group of 800 that emit those particular songs under very particular conditions. These particular females who sing these songs, they will only sing these songs when a male enters the same row or column as them inside their signaling radius. Okay, yeah, I got a picture of this. So here's our female here. And remember that her input layer, the controller for the female, is the position and heading of any males in her environment. So if a male enters the northwest corner of her territory and is heading east, this particular female does not emit song 6 or 7. She sings some other song. As that male continues, if that male suddenly is directly north of the female and heading east, that particular condition, north of me and heading east, that triggers the 6th or the 7th song. Yeah? This probably occurred just by chance, and they've grayed out 8 of these boxes here. So 8 of these boxes correspond to conditions under which, if the male takes on that situation, triggers that female song. Probably what happened is during the reproduction and mutation of females, at some point, one of those females emitted song 6 or 7 under maybe 1 or 2 of these 8 conditions, which is not necessarily good or bad, just happened by random chance. However, there must have been one or maybe a couple of males that when they actually obtained that state, when they were actually north of the female and heading east, and that triggered the female to emit song 6 or 7 by chance, that male turned 90 degrees to his right. So now that male is north of the female, but facing south. Yeah? This is a pretty good situation, right? Assuming that female now stopped singing song 6 or 7 and sang one of the other 6 songs, what do males tend to do in this world at this point in evolutionary time? Move forward. Success. We have a male that enters the female territory where that male's behavior was influenced by what the female sang, resulted in a reproductive event. Now we have a new male and new female produced by that reproductive event. Tell me about that new male and that new female. What are they likely to do when they're placed elsewhere in the world? The male more or less inherits the behavior of its male parent, and the female child more or less inherits the behavior of the female parent. There's a little bit of mutation, so they might not do exactly what their parents did. What can you tell me about that new male, new female?
We're likely to have another like pair that a female will put out those signals and the male will interpret it and turn left or right depending on which one.
Absolutely, right? So the new female is going to tend to sing the same kind of songs under the same conditions. And that new male, as he starts wandering around in his world, is likely to respond to those signals in a similar way, which means that male and that female are likely to produce grandchildren, right? Because we already have a few conditions under which that increases the rate of reproductive events compared to the situation at time step 7,500. Yeah? We have the beginnings of, at this point, we have the beginnings of signaling among this population. Between time step 7,500 and time step 1,500, 15,000, there must have been one or a few mutations that lined up just perfectly. They got the female to do the right thing and a male to do the right thing in response. Yeah? There's actually now at this point, quite a few males that are doing that. 77% of the time, all 800 males will turn right when they hear song 6, and they will turn left when they hear song 7. Yeah? Okay. As time goes on, the female might refine, or the generations of females will evolve to emit songs 6 and 7 in more of these conditions. They're basically widening their catch basin, right? They know how to lure males to themselves under a wider and wider range of conditions, which means those females are going to enjoy more reproductive events than their ancestor females, which only were able to lure a few men in for a reproductive event because they had a narrower catch basin. Yeah? So once this process starts going, there is sort of self-reinforcing dynamics at work here. Okay. We're going to pause for a moment. The investigators started to see the evolution of signaling, which is shown in the test case here. This is actually an A/B test. So test here is difficult to see in this picture. Let's see here. In the test, it's what we just talked about. And what they plotted in, oh gosh, this is really hard to see. It's this one here. This is the one we were just looking at. What we're plotting on the horizontal time is evolutionary time like before. The vertical axis here is the average number of moves that a male performs between reproductive events. So at the beginning, when the males are moving at random or moving in a straight line, it's each male goes more than 200 time steps before chancing on a female. But as we just saw in this situation here, we now have males that are reproducing more than every 50 time steps or less. Yeah? They ran everything back to the beginning. They started this world all over again with 1,600 random controllers, 800 in the females, 800 in the males. And in this case, they deafened the males. So the males could not hear the songs emitted by the females. And they just ran everything again. This is the control case here. Not surprisingly, as evolution wears on, these males don't do as well. They go 100 time steps before participating, on average, before participating in a reproductive event. But surprisingly, early in evolutionary time, these deafened males actually do better than the males that can hear. Why? What's happening here? So we're watching two different worlds. We're watching the evolution unroll in both worlds. We just saw what happened in world A. This is world B, where everything's the same except the males are deaf. And at least at the beginning, the males do better. Go ahead.
And the deaf males don't have to deal with listening to other signals and making it's just based on optimization and whatever gets in there, which probably results in like the move forward.
Move forward, exactly, right? So if we look at the male controllers, they're deaf. All they ever get at the input layer is 0, 0, 0. So the only thing evolution needs to do to the males is tune the synaptic weights in the male controllers so that move forward always has a stronger signal than the other 3 output neurons, right? It's harder for this to occur in the males that can hear because changes at the input layer obviously change what's happening at the output layer, right? So in the control case, in a way, the males are getting distracted at the beginning. They hear different things, and that might cause them to turn left or right or stay still, which before signaling has evolved is not a good thing to do.
So is it because it's more complex when they can hear, and so there's all the mutations that are happening. There's more like random chance in there, because like when I look at this, it seems like one of them is the control is moving towards the move straight, which is like one optima, and then the other one is moving towards another optima, but it can't be decreasing at first as it goes there, right?
So these curves both are decreasing. This is the males evolving the ability to go straight, right? They're actually evolving to ignore all the distractions in their world and sort of get rid of the bad stuff, which is turn left, turn right, or stay still. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, they're both decreasing.
Yep.
And they're still moving towards different optimas.
Yep. But in this particular, in the test world, world A that we just looked at, there is the potential for the males to do something better than just go forward, right? Which is assuming that there is a strain of females among the 800. May not be all of them, might only be 10 of them, might only be 5 females that just happen to change their song when a male enters their territory and is starting to actually head out of their territory. A female that changes her song at that moment in time, lined up with a male that happens to change what he does at that moment in time, which is turn right, do the right thing. Now you have it's a very rare situation, but among 1,600 of these agents, over 7,500 time steps, that rare event can lead to males and females that reproduce a little bit faster than females that signal at random and males that just always go straight no matter what's going on. Yeah? Yep.
So in this case, even if they start evolving to go straight, if they have the hearing, they'll eventually find the better solution. They won't get stuck in the worst solution, right?
This is a population, right? Everything you mentioned can just happen. It's depending on all of these things that can happen, which ones, if any of these strategies, give a reproductive advantage. So it's possible that a male that hears your song 6 turns to the left and heads out of the female's signaling radius, right? That male is unlikely to reproduce well because he, quote unquote, misunderstood the song. He reacted to the song, but he did the wrong thing, right? So the males have to not just change what they do when they hear a particular song, they have to do the right thing. Yeah? If they do, their male offspring and the female's female offspring are both still likely to do the right thing, which means they are likely to produce faster, and you start to get this strategy spreading through the population. Everybody see that? It's tricky, right? Because this is a very low probability event. Female's got to do the right thing, male's got to react, male's got to do the right thing. But it's possible that it gives a little bit of a selective advantage. That male and female and their descendants reproduce a little bit faster than the males that don't listen, or females that signal under the wrong conditions. And if that spark starts to catch and spread, now you get the evolution of signaling.
More like theoretical question.
Sure.
Talking about the study, did they find that the successive signal correlations develop faster, or was the time develop turn left and turn right about equal, all things given?
Good question. I think let's have a look here. So we just talked about this one. Here's a little cartoon of what happens. I think this is at time step 15,000. So we're going back to the previous situation. We've got our female here in A. I'm not sure if you can see this, but in A, the female is singing the song 0, 0, 0. Here's our male that's in her southwest quadrant. Hasn't quite entered her territory yet. So the female does not detect this male. The male is down here, and the little black triangle here is indicating that that male is heading north. At time step B, the male has moved forward and has now entered the female's territory. And you'll notice that now the female has changed her song. So the female at least is starting to do the right thing. She's detecting a male. She's changed her song. In C, the male has continued to move forward. The male is not responding to song 101. The male has moved, which has changed the input layer for this female, and she has also not changed her song. So the male keeps moving, but in D here, when the male enters onto the western row here of the female changes her song, 0, 1, 1, and the male reacts by turning right, and now the female has gone back to song 101. What is the male going to do at the next time step? If there was a panel F, the male will do what males usually do, which is just move forward, and a reproductive event occurs. Yeah. Here's another situation. Here's a male coming in from the female's northwest, heading east, moves east into her territory. She obligingly changes her song. Male keeps moving to the east, and this male turns north. Looks problematic, right? The female, however, if you look at panels D and E, the female keeps singing the same song. We know that this male will turn left when he hears this song. As we transition from D to E, we can see that that's what the male will do. So as long as the female keeps singing 101, we know that this male will interpret the song 101 as turn left, right? The male keeps turning to the left, keeps turning to the left, and in G, the moment the male is turning south, the female changes her song, and the male continues, yeah? So not great. The male's a little confused here, but the female is doing the right thing, increasing the chance of a reproductive event here, right? So this is not perfect, right? You can imagine some mutations occurring in maybe the male or the female to produce this situation, right? This is a little bit more efficient, yeah? So these are just kind of snapshots during the evolution of signaling. The refining of the sender, the conditions under which the sender sends particular songs, and the behavioral refinement of the receiver, which in this case are the males, figuring out exactly what the best thing is to do under certain signaling conditions. Okay. We're going to look at one last experiment in this series. In this case, what they did is the males are still able to do the same thing. Stay still, go forward, turn left, turn right. We're going to assign each of these four behaviors the digits 0, 1, 2, or 3. We're going to, in this case, we're going to, oh, sorry, I skipped a slide here. So the males are doing the same thing before, but now we're going to restrict the output layer of the females to just 2 output neurons, which means the males have 2 input neurons, which means there's only 4 possible songs. So we're going to rerun this world again. We're going to go back to 1600 random controllers, 800 for the males, 800 for the females. We're restricting the kinds of songs that the females can hear, and therefore the kinds of songs that the males can hear. By restricting the females to 4 different songs, we can write down at a given point in time a distribution of all 800 males and what they're doing under these 4 conditions. So this table here, let's go to this, the upper left part of this table. There should actually be 4 zeros here. where to the right-hand side of the colon, these 4 digits represent what actions that set of males did under that song. So at this point in time, at time 0, the number to the left of the column represents how many males had this behavior. So at this point in time, there were 4 males that, regardless of what song the female sung, regardless of which of the 4 songs the female sung, the males always stood still. Everybody see that? If we go to the next element here in this table, there were 6 males that stood still under song 1, stood still when they heard song 2, stood still when they heard song 3, but went forward whenever they heard song 4. Let's jump down here to the right, the bottom right element here. There are 6 males that do what? They always turn right, exactly, right? So if you scan your eye over this whole table and you kind of focus on the numbers that are to the left of the colons, it's showing you sort of the distribution of groups of males. Males that all do the same thing. And if you look to the right of the column, you can read off here exactly what those males did under all the 4 possible conditions they could ever experience. Everybody see that? As you would expect, at time step 0, there is a more or less uniform distribution of numbers to the left of the columns, right? There are no species here, there's no groups, there's just a whole bunch of different males doing different things. Let's jump forward in the evolution of this world by 8,000 time steps. You'll see that now a lot of these different groups of males have died out. There is still one lone male here who stays still when he hears song 1 and turns left when he hears the other 3 songs. There's only one of him. This is probably not a very good strategy. We can see that most of the males have clumped into this group here, where under 3 of the 4 songs, they are going forward. Remember that for a male, most of the time the best thing to do is move forward. But under song 2, they turn to the right. And there's a lot of those males. So the first thing we know is that there's got to be quite a few females out there that sing song 2. Yeah? Under what conditions are the females emitting song 2? We know that the males will turn right whenever they hear song 2. What conditions do you think triggers females to sing this particular song?
When the male enters the cross.
The cross, right? It's probably some variation of what we just saw, right? Males tend to move forward, they enter the female's territory, and when that male enters the same column or row, generally speaking, if the female keeps singing song 2, males that are on her left will quickly turn to the right and will now be ready to move towards her. If she keeps singing for males that are on her right for 3 time steps, those males will now have turned right 3 times, and they'll be ready to head west towards the female. So she can capture quite a few males with just one song. Not she, they. Multiple females have evolved this strategy, right? So although we're only looking at the distribution of male strategies, you can kind of indirectly infer what the males are doing. I'm going to advance the slide again, and we're going to jump forward in evolutionary time in this world. What do you think you're going to see on the next slide?
Fewer groups.
We've got more males in this group. We've got fewer groups, but something else is kind of interesting happening. There are still some non-trivial there's still some relatively large groups out here, like this one, for example. In this case, we have 127 males that are, again, under 3 of the 4 conditions going straight. That's good. These males, however, turn right when they hear song 4. Yeah? So we have 127 males who's with this response 1113. They respond to females that emit only signals 3 and 4. So we've got two, we're just going to focus on these two groups of males. So we've got two groups of males that are doing different things. These are probably not genetically related males, right? These are males and descendants and descendants and descendants. Two different groups of males that are doing different things. It turns out that at this point in time, we also have two groups of females that are singing signals, emitting signals 3 and 4. But this group of males can only be waved in to song if the female sings song 3, and this group of males can only be waved in if for females when they hear the song 4. The females are able to sing both songs, and they do. They sing songs 3 and 4 under the right conditions, but they only capture some of the males from this group, because those males will ignore song 4. They'll respond to, song, I think I've got this wrong, I'm sorry. Song 2 and 4 here. These males only respond to song 2. These males only respond to song 4. These females are emitting song signals 2 and 4. Not bad.
It's kind of like speciation.
It is absolutely speciation, right? We have two separate groups of males that are responding differently to the same environment. They all exist in this donut world, this toroid, but they're doing different things. What do you think happens next? We have females that can sing songs 2 and 4. I'm sorry, this should be a 2, not a 3. Females that sing 2 or 4, but one group that only does the right thing under song 2, and another group that only responds appropriately under song 4. Is this it? Is there any more evolutionary potential here?
Maybe the 1-3-1-3 species will start to get traction.
You'll notice there's a group of 20 males down here, and their behavior is 1-3-1-3. Let's move forward in time. I want you to pay attention to this cell, and this cell. So we're keeping our eye on 1-3-1-1, 1-1-1-3, and 1-3-1-3. At this point in time, these two groups greatly outnumber this group of males. The 1-3-1-3 males are bilingual. If they enter a female's territory, she only sings song 2, she only sings song 4, or she's bilingual and she's able to sing songs 2 and 4 under the right conditions. These males will do the right thing for all of those females. These monolingual groups or species, if this group enters the territory of a female that sings song 2, tough luck for these males. They've missed a reproductive opportunity. Same thing for this group that enter females that only sing song 4. There's also so there's lots of other things going on here. What was the other one? Sorry?
It's right above 1-3-1-1.
1-2-1-1. Yeah, there's a huge group here, right? So there's other things also going on here. There's some other groups that are also quite numerous. Yeah. Even though this group is also big, what do you think the evolutionary end game is in this world? Where are things headed? We have females that have evolved to sing songs 2 and 4 under the right conditions. If you're a male living in this world or trying to produce offspring in this world, it's the best thing you can do. Become a 1-3-1-3. At 14,000 time steps, we can see that the bilingual males are catching up. 16,000 time steps, still haven't caught up, but the monolingual groups are getting smaller. 20,000 time steps, 30,000 time steps, 40,000 time steps. Yeah? Okay.
When you run this again, wouldn't it, so like 1-3-1-3 is like the same as 1-2-1-2 if there's a different population of females.
Absolutely.
Or like even it could be 1, 2, 2, 2 or something like that. Like, so I feel like if you run this again, you can get a different answer every time.
Absolutely, right? If we started human evolution over again, would Latin evolve? Would Mandarin evolve? Would English evolve? Would French? Right? It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that senders consistently emit a song or a language or a signal consistently under certain conditions, that if the receiver also consistently does a particular action under those conditions, is good for both the sender and the receiver. If we reran this again, absolutely there's no reason that we would evolve females that emit songs 2 and 4 under certain male conditions, and there's no reason that males would evolve to turn right under those 2 songs. Yeah? Okay, for those of you that only know one language, here's a strong hint for you. Okay. All right, that's all we're going to say about the evolution of communication. Any questions, comments? Obviously, the evolution of communication in and of itself is an interesting question. For our purposes in this course, it's a means to an end, right? If we want machines to coordinate their actions on very large scales, we might program in the coordination strategy for them. In the spirit of evolutionary robotics, however, this very early experiment says we don't necessarily have to. Okay. All right, we're going to start in, we've got about 20 minutes left, so we're going to start in on lecture 23 now, which comes at collective intelligence from a very different direction, which is, how does a group start to form in the first place? Self-replication. Okay. Okay. Why would we be interested in self-replicating machines? Hollywood has trained us by now that that's probably the worst possible thing we could be doing, right? Okay. Obviously, lots of ethics around self-replicating machines. We're all wearing masks because of a self-replication event that's been going for a few years now. Humans, for very good reason, are nervous about things that are able to amplify themselves or self-replicate. We're going to actually talk about self-replication today and next class, and we'll come back to self-replication at the end of the course, where I'm going to show you some self-replicating xenobots, actual robots that are able to actually self-replicate. We will defer our ethical discussion about self-replication till then. Yeah? Lots of risks, but also a huge opportunity if we can make self-replicating machines, which is the promise of exponential utility. Let's start with utility, which is just an economics fancy term for useful work, right? We have lots of machines in our world now, like car factories, that do useful work for us. But if we want to produce twice as many cars as we currently do, we need to make twice as many factories. We need to invest in the construction of those factories, pay workers to work in those factories, buy fuel and supply it to the factories. We, the humans, have to put in a lot of financial work. We have to invest a lot of human resources into doubling the utility of our ability to produce cars. Not that we necessarily need more cars, but whatever it is we need more of, it's not exponential. The more cars, the more machines, the more food we need to put in more effort. If we can create a factory that doesn't necessarily produce cars, but produces factories instead, we have factories that produce factories. Those factories produce factories, and at some point, we send a signal to the factories to also produce cars. We as humans can put in much less of an initial investment. All we need to do is build the first factory, and then that factory will build more factories. Humans don't need to build more factories. The factory takes over that job. Assuming this cartoon system here has enough raw materials at hand, so there are only certain conditions under which this would occur, we can get, in theory, exponential utility. With the construction of just one factory, and if we start to record the number of cars produced over time, the number of cars will increase at a certain point in time, and then double. The rate of car production will double again, rate of car production will double again, and we get over time exponential utility. That's the reason, that's the main reason why we might even want to consider creating self-replicating machines in the first place. Question?
Are there other examples of exponential utility that don't involve self-replication that you can think of?
Possibly. So are there other examples of exponential utility that don't involve self-replication? Great question. Can you think of any? Think about all the technology, hardware and software, that surrounds us at the moment. Whether your cell phone is actually doing useful work for you or your computer, again, that's something we could argue about. But if you think about machines or algorithms doing work, doing stuff for us, can you think of examples of technology where if you watch that technology from month to month or year to year, the amount of work that that technology as a whole is doing is increasing faster than linear? Maybe it's not doubling, but the rate of increase is increasing from one year to the next.
Like on a really small, more biological level, positive feedback loops in cells, so like a small amount of signals released that you have something really, really fast.
Absolutely. So in biology, it's everywhere, right? That's how we work. That's how COVID works. That's how every evolutionary system works, by replicating and producing more of itself. Now, obviously, we have plants and animals that do useful work for us. We make our buildings out of them. We eat them. So you can argue that the natural system has utility as well. You plant a garden, and again, you need to put in a little bit of effort, but a lot of the things going on in the garden replicate on their own, and the amount of food you can harvest from that garden over time doesn't increase linearly. Under the right conditions, it increases superlinearly or exponentially. But that's the natural world. What about the technological world?
Maybe like transistor size?
Transistor size? Yes, transistors have gotten smaller over time. They've gotten smaller faster. But it's taken more and more human effort for us to do it. When we talk about exponential utility, the idea is it's hands-off. We create the seed, we create the self-replicating machine or algorithm, and it multiplies and does more useful work on our behalf without requiring exponential elbow grease from us, right? So not really, right? We have apps that obviously you can download and they sort of replicate across our phones as you download them, but this isn't strictly the idea of self-replicating machines or algorithms. Yeah? Comment?
And I guess the only example of a non-self-replicating thing that would technically be exponential growth would be like a big global warming machine just with a positive feedback loop from greenhouse gases.
Yeah, possibly. Okay, yeah, let's make a greenhouse gas making machine. We got to make that machine replicate itself though, right? Otherwise we don't get this feedback loop.
You kind of do, because the more the ice melts, then you get...
Yeah, okay, maybe we rely on Mother Nature and yeah, absolutely. We're going to rely on the greenhouse effect. That's a great point. We might be able to create a non-self-replicating machine that establishes a positive feedback loop with the environment. And yes, absolutely. Utility is, it's too cold out there. Let's warm up the planet. Yeah. So yes, that's a great example. This idea of self-replicating machines, Hollywood did not invent it, regardless of what Hollywood will tell you. This idea has been around for a long time, actually going back centuries. But we're going to start our discussion in the 1940s with John von Neumann. Von Neumann is famous for a lot of things in computer science. He's one of the pioneers of the computer age. All of our computers are based on von Neumann architecture, for which he's rightly famous. He is also famous for coming up with this thought experiment. This is not a physical machine. This was a formal description, mathematically, of the conditions under which a machine, what are the minimum conditions under which a machine will start to replicate itself. This is not about utility yet. This is like your greenhouse gas emitting factory, just a machine that produces more of itself. It doesn't do anything useful for us yet. What do you need? Von Neumann identified three necessary components. This machine has to have a, quote, blueprint for itself. The machine has to have a mechanism in which that mechanism can read the blueprint and construct a machine, a new blueprint, That machine is empty. The new machine is empty. It does not contain a blueprint yet. The final step is another mechanism, this third mechanism that copies the blueprint into the machine. Yeah? This is the 1940s. Interesting that von Neumann was using these terms blueprint or tape and machine. Who else was using that terminology around this time? Turing, right? The Turing machine, tapes and machines. Why were tapes and machines on the minds of, then these were cyberneticians, these weren't computer scientists yet. Why were people thinking about tapes and machines in the 1940s? You have magnetic tapes, yeah, absolutely, which is an invention because somebody thought up the idea of a tape and actually made physical tapes. But where did this idea of this distinction come from in the first place? Tapes and machines. Of course, the early computer pioneers built tapes and machines. That was the beginning of the computer age. Where did the idea, they didn't dream up this idea from nowhere. Where did it come from? Not quite. There were tapes, but not in this context. The tapes encoded information about the machine. You're right, tapes existed. Yep.
Was it supposed to be like a plug in the bus with like a thinker and a doer? You have like instructions.
Maybe. So obviously Turing was thinking about intelligence, the brain and the machine. We talked about René Descartes. There's already this distinction. But this is not brain and machine. This is tape and machine. A tape that is somehow a record or encoding of the machine itself. You have, let's pay attention to component number 2 here, a mechanism that reads the blueprint and from that blueprint makes a machine.
So this is just a thought experiment. Were they concerned about like the argument of like, does the tape constitute a second machine?
Not quite. There were discussions about that, but we're trying to go right back to the beginning, right? A tape that encodes a machine. For us, actually, obviously, that idea is not that surprising, but it was a very new idea in the 1940s. Why? DNA, yeah? So in biology, there was an idea starting to emerge that somewhere inside a cell, there was an actual record of the cell, the organ, the organism. And if there was somehow molecularly a recording in there, there must be machines inside the cell that knew how to read that recording and make more cells, make more organisms. Yeah? The entire history of AI and robotics has been intertwined with biology from the beginning. Biology has always been an inspiration for AI and robotics. Here was one of those intertwinings right at the beginning of the computer age, and actually robotics as well, this idea of self-replicating machines. Yeah? Okay. So again, just to go over von Neumann's universal constructor, this mechanism, this physical thing, constructs the machine by reading the blueprint, right? The details of what was actually going on in DNA and cells wasn't worked out until years after, but the idea was in the air among the biologists. The copy machine creates a copy of the blueprint, right? DNA has to propagate into the next generation. You can't have an empty machine, or else that machine will not know how to build copies of itself. Finally, the copied tape is placed into the new machine, resulting in a machine that has its own tape and a mechanism that knows how to read that tape, make a new machine, put the tape into that new machine, and on you go, right? These are the necessary conditions for achieving self-replication. We're going to jump 30 years forward to John Conway's Game of Life. Who's seen the Game of Life before? Okay, not everybody. So this is known as a cellular automata, and we're just going to briefly touch on this idea, cellular automata. This was designed to be, again, a very simple model of living systems. Each black square here is meant to represent a cell, and white space is meant to represent places where there are no cells. In a cellular automata, we look at a given position, And if this particular position has 2 or 3 neighbors, if there are 2 or 3 cells in this position's neighborhood, we create a new cell in this position. If this particular cell has too many neighbors, they kind of asphyxiate this cell, and this cell goes from black to white. This cell dies. If you replicate these rules at every point in this space, you get these interesting dynamics emerging. Like, for example, these moving things, known as gliders. These 2 things up here are glider guns. They are shooting gliders, or they're shooting material at each other that ends up spitting out one glider after another. We could have a very long discussion about cellular automata in the game of life. The only purpose I want to point out here for us is that, again, this is a formal description. There's a little bit of math underlying this that produces things that reproduce or amplify themselves. Not that different from the universal constructor we just saw from the 1940s. Yeah? Okay. So people have been thinking about what are the abstract conditions under which things will start to produce copies of themselves. We're going to jump back now to the late 50s. And at this time, Lionel Penrose started to think about actually making some von Neumann replicators. The math is nice and all, but can we actually do this in reality? Penrose started to do this mechanically. We're going to look at a few of Penrose's crystals. These are just wooden blocks. There's no circuitry, no sensors, no motors. These are not robots. Remember when we talked about passive dynamic walkers? We got all the way back to things that weren't robots, just mechanical things that move passively. Same thing here. Okay. Imagine we build out of wood these 2 shapes. We put them inside a box, and we start to shake that box back and forth, left and right. So we are creating something, and then we're introducing a little bit of energy into this system. Turns out that even with these simple shapes, if you distribute a bunch of these simple shapes, individual shapes inside this box and shake it back and forth, actually not much happens. But if you seed this system with this seed, you take 2 of these blocks and you snap them together in this way, this seed, if you now shake this box back and forth, what's going to happen?
I think eventually all of the shapes are going to link together.
Absolutely. So imagine this seed bumps into this piece. This seed is going to push the left-hand side of this piece down, and with just the right agitation, this piece is going to click into place, and now we've got 3 elements. Keep shaking. It's going to attach the 4th and the 5th. We don't have self-replication. We just have growth. We have a crystal or cancer, something that with individual pieces and a little bit of energy introduced into the system will just keep growing. Yeah? Okay. We'll play the video next time. Let's look at a slightly more complicated situation. We've got more or less the same shape as before, except now you'll notice that for each piece here, on one side we have a hook, and on the other side, no hook. So this piece is a right hook, and this piece is a left hook. Yeah? You'll notice that they've also paired them up and stuck a little cylinder through them, so these pieces can kind of rotate about this cylinder. Imagine we create this seed. We take this pair, and we put them in this box with these 2 pairs sitting off to the side. And we shake this back and forth. This thing will produce this thing. This thing reproduces and makes a copy of itself. Yeah? Let's have a look at this thing. We see there is no hook. There's no hook here and no hook here. If this is shaking back and forth and it bumps into this one, what happens to this one here? We've got a gray piece and a blue piece. What happens to the gray and blue piece?
It'll kind of splay out like that.
It'll splay out, right? You'll notice that this piece will push down on the gray piece, lifting the gray hook up. This back piece will push the right-hand side of the blue piece up, pushing the blue piece in the back down. And now the left-hand side of this piece looks exactly like this piece. I'm sorry, it doesn't look like this piece. We have the front up and the back down, but we have two hooks now on the left. So if they now come into contact with this piece, which has hooks on the right, it'll reproduce. Great. Okay, we've gone from growth to reproduction by making these shapes a little bit more complicated. But this replicator is limited. How is it limited? Obviously, if we don't put any of these additional pieces in the box, it's going to starve, right? It can't make any more copies. We need to feed it with raw material. But even if we feed it with raw material, what's the problem here?
They still need to be like in the right position to be pushed either way, or the whole thing will jam.
Absolutely, right? So you'll notice that they picked these 4 pieces and put them in the right place and put them together in just the right way to manage replication, right? So this replicator is a picky eater, right? Most of the food that you could place into this box won't result in a replication event. Just the right amount of food will. Okay. Next one we're going to see, and this is the last one we'll see today. We've got 2 minutes left. The next one is an omnivore. It's much less of a picky eater. Okay. We're going to switch now to a hook and latch system. Here's our seed over here. You'll notice that they've snapped these 2 pieces together so that the left-hand piece's latch has hooked into the hook on the right-hand side. And as this hook came down, it pushed this latch to rotate it up. That's the seed. We've made the seed, we drop it into our table. Imagine we start shaking this table left and right, and this piece comes into contact with this piece. This arm pushes against this latch and rotates this latch upward. And as it does, it comes down and hooks into this latch. It's unhooked this one. It's unhooked this one from this one, so it leaves this piece behind. This is not replication quite yet. This is, again, a steady state system. If we create a seed, we drop this pair in with a bunch of these individual pieces, we can see this pair or this seed start to kind of move around. It's not replicating, though. We never get 2 seeds. Yeah? I think we're going to pause here for today. We'll see the next step in this progression next week. You have a quiz due tonight. You're working on assignment 4. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks very much.